Nice to see you again.
Thank you so much.
You're a familiar face amongst the journalists of Pakistan.
I recognize a lot of familiar faces.
This is Mazhar
How are
Abbas.
you? Good to see you again, too. Hello. How are you? Good. Very good. Thank you. Hi. How are you? Hello. Good to see you. Hi. Hello. How are you? Very good. I love the red. Very bright. How are you?
Yes, I want to tell you at least my mother-in-law is
Very warm welcome to Pakistan, Secretary Clinton. It's good to have you with us again. You come at a time which is very important for this crucial relationship, troubled times, if we may say, and you've had lots of meetings in the last few hours. We hope to get a lot of news out of you during this session, but we do hope that you've been able to untie some hard knots. And we're looking forward to a candid discussion this afternoon. Let me start by introducing my colleagues. Let's start on the left. This is Mr. Hamid Mir, anchor person and executive editor from Geo News. His is the longest running show in Pakistan television, Capital Talk. We have Munize Jahangir. You know her already. She's an anchor person from Express News. Then we have Arshad Sharif. He's the bureau chief with the Dawn News. Then on our right is Mazhar Abbas, Director ARY, Director News, and we have Nadeem Malik. He's an anchor person and Director Programs Aaj News. And then we have Anwarul Hassan, Senior Anchor Person from PTV, and I'm Naseem Zahra, Director Current Affairs, Dunya News. So let me start first. I was reading just a few days ago an article that you wrote in Foreign Policy magazine, America's Pacific Century, and it was interesting. You had put down the names of your partner countries. There was Mongolia, there was Brunei, there was China, India, and other countries. Pakistan was not mentioned there. You had another category. You had bracketed Pakistan with Iran, with North Korea and Afghanistan as challenges. So that kind of raises questions about United States' strategic intent towards Pakistan.
Well, I think it's fair to say, Naseem, that you are both a partner and a challenge. And I think that is true for many countries. China, for example, would be in that category as well. The challenges, unfortunately, sometimes overwhelm the partnership and the opportunities. And so this is a relationship that we are constantly tending to and working on. And certainly the challenges that we face in trying to end the conflict in Afghanistan is one that we both have to address. So it is a strategic objective. It's a very important partnership, but the challenge part of it, if you look at the balance, is now somewhat higher until we can work our way through how to get back on a trajectory where we're focused on Pakistan's economic growth, its social development, and not on the difficulties posed by the terrorist threat.
So it wasn't an omission in that article. This is the state of affairs right now. Hamid, over to you.
Secretary Clinton, you said in Kabul that talks are still possible with Taliban. And recently on October 5th, Wall Street Journal claimed that US officials tried to establish contact with the Haqqani Network and even met them secretly somewhere. So many people in Pakistan, they raise this question that on one side, United States is trying to establish contacts with Haqqani Network, you want talks with Haqqani Network, but you want Pakistan to take action against them. And these people who raise questions, they also say that, look, the Americans have a different policy for Taliban and Haqqani Network in Afghanistan and a different policy in Pakistan. Why Pakistan and US cannot adopt a joint strategy for talks with Taliban and Haqqani Network?
Well, I think this is a really important question, and I thank you for raising it, because, in fact, we do not see any contradiction. In fact, the Pakistani government officials helped to facilitate such a meeting, and we want more coordination between the United States, Pakistan, and Afghanistan for what must be, with respect to the conflict in Afghanistan, an Afghan-led effort. But Afghanistan cannot do it without both Pakistan and the United States. We believe that there is now an opportunity for us to begin talking, but there is no guarantee that the talking will result in anything that will move us toward a peaceful resolution. So as we discussed in my meetings over the last day, we're going to continue fighting where necessary to protect our interests, and so are the Pakistani military, because you cannot allow terrorists to gain ground and to be unfortunately inflicting attacks on people. But we also are open to talking, and we have reached out to the Taliban, we have reached out to the Haqqani Network to test their willingness and their sincerity. And we are now working among us, Afghanistan and Pakistan and the United States, to try to put together a process that would sequence us toward an actual negotiations. I hasten to say that in my discussions with Pakistani officials, they hold the same view that we do. We don't know whether this will work, but we believe strongly we must try it. And as General Petraeus has explained his experience in Iraq, and this is not Iraq, but just from a certain perspective, he both fought and talked at the same time to create an atmosphere that diminished and eventually ended what had become a civil war. And so we see no contradiction. We want to see more talking than fighting, but in order to get to the talking, we have to keep fighting.
Muniz.
Well, a very warm welcome to Pakistan.
Thank you.
My question to you is, when you talk about talking to the Haqqani Network, you said you've opened some negotiations with them. At the same time, Pakistan is very clear on the position with the Haqqani Network. The Pakistani position is that they will act against the Haqqani Network in their own time, and there seems to be in no hurry to do so. Now, have you accepted that position of the Pakistani government, that they may not be able to act against them?
You know, I think it's important to define act, because we understand that military action is a very difficult decision to undertake. So what we have discussed are other forms of acting, because there are ways through our mutual cooperation we can share intelligence to make sure that real-time intelligence is pointing the way toward interdicting potential Haqqani attacks. On the other side of the border, we are running a concerted military effort against the Haqqani Network that has taken up positions inside Afghanistan, and our military leadership has shared that with your military leadership. So to cooperate so that we know when people are crossing the border is key. To cooperate so that as we go after the Haqqani inside Afghanistan, your position to prevent them from coming back into safe havens here, to learn as much as we can, because we're not in any kind of negotiations. We had one preliminary meeting to essentially just see if they would show up for even a preliminary meeting, for us to not only share intelligence, but to do everything we can to disrupt their activities. And you know, for example, here is an area where we want greater cooperation between us, and that's with respect to these improvised explosive devices. You know, the Haqqani Network drove a truck packed with 1,000 pounds of explosives into one of our forward operating bases. 77 of our soldiers were injured. Thankfully, none were killed because our barriers held. This is a problem for every civilized country dealing with these IEDs. And so we're now looking at how we have shared information to help the Pakistani government deal with the ingredients that go into these IEDs, because we face the same problem in the United States. The first time this became an issue for us was at the Oklahoma City bombing, where a big explosion killed several hundred people. And we realized it was common fertilizer being used. And so we had to take action, which took several years, and so we're sharing that with the Pakistani government. So action takes many different forms, and it's not just a call for military action.
All right.
Secretary Clinton, you are credited for being the chief strategist for the 42nd American president, and now 2012 is again election time for the American president. Isn't it right to say that you are looking for scapegoats where the blame for failure in Afghanistan can be put on Pakistan? And what we are hearing is over the last few years, since 2001, the same things coming from the American officials about engagement, the talk about fighting the militants, the Taliban, and the same conditions holding. Initially there was talk that we won't talk to Taliban, then that stance became a bit mild. Isn't it an admission of defeat, or are you looking for new scapegoats?
No, it is neither. And yet I know there are many in Pakistan, and I thank you for raising the issue because I'd like to address it. We are not looking for scapegoats. We are not looking to place blame. We are looking for the kind of realistic, cooperative relationship that we think is in the best interests of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the United States. We've had a lot of cooperation over the past 10 years. Remember, our primary objective was going after al-Qaeda. If the Taliban had given up Osama bin Laden in 2001 when the request was made, history might have been different. But instead the Taliban, sheltered him and continued to work with and support al-Qaeda. Our goal was to go after those who had attacked us. And with Pakistani cooperation and a lot of hard work, we have broken up the core al-Qaeda group. However, in the past 10 years, what we've seen is a syndicate of terrorist groups that have taken root, not only in this region of the world, others as well. So we've had to adjust our tactics and to some extent look for new ways of being effective. We think we are now at a point where the potential for talking exists, and it took a while to get there. And I give credit to President Obama's strategy of increasing our military presence in Afghanistan to reverse the momentum of the Taliban, to make it clear to them, at least some of them, that they had a future in Afghanistan if they were willing to abide by the Constitution, renounce violence, renounce al-Qaeda, etc. So, no, we know how hard this is. This is a challenge to both of us. And I think it's important to recognize that we want to deepen and broaden our cooperation because we see the very damaging effect of this kind of ideology mixed with the violence in your country, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere.
Sure, something we understand ourselves. It's interesting that you think that the Taliban have been put on the back foot. There's been a reversal. I'll come back to that, but Mazhar, your question.
Secretary Clinton, Pakistan and US have been strategic partners, and you yourself have said that we have shared a lot of things. What led the US administration think not to share May 2nd operation, and you acted unilaterally without realizing that it's an attack on Pakistan's sovereignty?
Well, I have to be very, very honest with you. We considered this to be such an important operation, vital to our national security, that we did not share information even in our own government beyond a very small group of people. And that was for the obvious reasons, that this was such a sensitive operation. We had been searching for bin Laden for a decade. We could not afford to lose him again because we see the very damaging effect of this kind of ideology mixed with the violence in your country, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere.
Sure, something we understand ourselves. It's interesting that you think that the Taliban have been put on the back foot. There's been a reversal. I'll come back to that, but Mazhar, your question.
Secretary Clinton, Pakistan and US have been strategic partners, and you yourself have said that we have shared a lot of things. What led the US administration think not to share May 2nd operation, and you acted unilaterally without realizing that it's an attack on Pakistan's sovereignty?
Well, I have to be very, very honest with you. We considered this to be such an important operation, vital to our national security, that we did not share information even in our own government beyond a very small group of people. And that was for the obvious reasons, that This was such a sensitive operation. We had been searching for bin Laden for a decade. We could not afford to lose him again the way we lost him at Tora Bora, and therefore we took action that was as limited in scope as possible, aimed solely at the people in that compound with the intention of either capturing or, if he resisted, killing bin Laden. We recognized that, of course, it was going to happen on the territory of Pakistan, and we immediately called the Pakistani leadership to express to them what we had done and why we thought it was so vitally important. And we don't see it as the kind of ongoing action against Pakistan that should give rise to any ongoing suspicion, distrust, or problems. But we do know that it was viewed that way by many in Pakistan. But this is an area that we have worked through and talked very candidly about with our counterparts, and we are back to cooperating on the mutual dangers and threats we both face.
Yeah, certainly one of the most difficult periods in Pakistan-US relation over the May 2nd, the fallout of that. Yes, Nadeem.
Yesterday you made a very strong statement that we are going to seek you in your safe havens on this side of the border or on the other side of the border. Then there was a report in US media today that Secretary Clinton has given a very strong message to the Pakistani authorities that if you fail to act, we'll act on unilateral basis. I will combine this statement with one other news item which appeared 2 weeks ago. It was related to a meeting in Washington chaired by President Obama regarding national security, where several options regarding North Waziristan were considered, including sending ground troops to Pakistani areas. I want to ask you two specific things here: unilateral action and sending ground troops. Is it an option for United States against Pakistan?
Let me say, with respect to the ground troops, that may have been raised, but it was not at all considered.
But it was raised.
Well, everything is raised in a meeting with people sitting around a table, and that has, that reflects the worry and the frustration for this reason. I was just at our embassy in Kabul. The Haqqani Network bombarded our embassy for many hours. We were very fortunate that no Americans lost their lives, although some Afghans waiting for visas were unfortunately killed. And I'm the Secretary of State. I'm responsible for the lives and the well-being of the people who are our diplomats and our American employees and our local employees in embassies across the globe. I just want you to put yourself in our position. We have been warning about the Haqqanis. We've been warning about safe havens. We have presented information and evidence. We have shared intelligence. Suppose they had gotten lucky. Suppose that car bomb had killed 77 American soldiers, or suppose a car bomb or an effective barrage of assault weapons had killed Americans. Put yourself in the position that suppose that had happened to the Pakistani embassy in Kabul or some other place. We don't want to act unilaterally. We want to act in concert with our friends, our partners, our strategic allies in Pakistan. But we don't want there to be any misunderstanding that we have to act, otherwise there will be perhaps an incident in the future that takes it out of the hands of any president. We don't want to get to that. And it's something that we are doing everything we can to avoid. So when we talk about actions, as I was just talking to Maniza about, we talk about specific things we can do together, but a lot of it depends upon cooperation with our Pakistani counterparts. We think that is far better than having some disaster happen that requires some kind of response, which we are not at all interested in getting to. We want to avoid that.
So are we saying we are ruling out boots on the ground?
Yeah, that has never been a serious consideration.
So we're ruling out boots on the ground?
Never been a serious consideration.
Yeah.
Secretary Clinton.
I can't speak for all the millions of people who work for the United States government, just like you can't speak for everybody who works for the Pakistani government.
So it's good to know it's not a option.
No.
Secretary Clinton, from a common sense perspective,
I'm asking you this question, that in recent times we are witnessing a very rocky US-Pakistan relations based on strong contradictory and conflicting statements coming from US vis-a-vis Pakistan's role in war against terrorism, which has entered its 10th year. It's almost a decade. Like, on the one hand, Pakistan is always appreciated that it acted as a frontline state, it's a strategic ally. But on the other hand, we see that Pakistan is always blamed for overtly and covertly supporting the terrorists, for harboring safe havens in our areas. Don't you think such sort of a rocky relationship, it adds to the trust deficit which already exists between the governments, but it also augments the anti-US sentiment which is very much prevalent in our society?
Thank you.
I very much regret that, but I think your statement is accurate. I think there is a trust deficit, and certainly I know there is growing anti-Americanism and, frankly, growing anti-Pakistani feelings in my country. And I don't think that's particularly productive, and I don't think it's merited. Do we have differences? Yes. Do we get frustrated with each other? Yes. There is no doubt about that. If we were not friends and not partners and, yes, not strategic allies, we would both just walk away. And we wouldn't even have the relationship. But, it goes back to the mother-in-law idea. We're in this together.
You don't want to be the mother-in-law in this case.
But the fact is that we know we each have more work to do to deal with this trust deficit. Yeah. And we think there have been a lot of positive changes and developments in our relationship. But we also face a sense of urgency about this terrorist threat. And we do get concerned because we see it first and foremost as a threat to you and to Afghanistan, but then to us and others. And we sometimes feel as though because it's happening up in the border areas, which is a long way from Islamabad and a long way from Lahore and a long way from Karachi, that it's not taken all that seriously by many Pakistanis. And many Pakistanis wonder, why are we so obsessed with this? Something's happening up there, but I have to worry about whether my electricity is on and my kid goes to school and all the things of everyday life. And we believe that in today's world, you cannot let these terrorists get a foothold anywhere because they are uncontrollable and they create consequences for countries and the people who live in those countries. Therefore, we are seeking a greater sense of urgency in addressing this and trying to communicate not only with your government but with the people of Pakistan, so you don't think we're out there just fomenting, but we really see it from a clear perspective. We've had experience in Colombia where terrorists took up space and pretty soon we're controlling 40% of the country because initially the government said, well, that's not in Bogota, that's far away. And then we spent 10 years and billions of dollars helping the Colombians dislodge the terrorists. So we have a broader global perspective, and we know that these groups can start wars. Suppose they go attack in India again. And I've been told by Prime Minister Singh he wants a positive relationship with Pakistan. If they kill a bunch of people and the signature is somebody in Pakistan did it, it's going to be very hard to control that reaction. So I'm only saying this because I want the people of Pakistan to understand we are not making this up. We are not scapegoating. We're not blaming. We're trying to convey a sense of urgency about what could happen inside your own country.
Yes, I guess Secretary Clinton, if the ball is back in my court, indeed what you're saying is true, but the fact is it's still distant from where you live. It's on a day-to-day basis. Every Pakistani, I think, feels strongly about terrorism, but I think we have just different ways of approaching the issue. Now, you've had very important meetings with an important team over the last one day. Tell us something about any forward process that has taken place. Tell us that there have been some breakthroughs. Tell us that there is better understanding.
I can tell you all of that, Naseem.
Please tell us.
I can tell you that I think we've done a lot to clear the air. I think that our cooperative relationships between our military, between our intelligence agencies are back on an upward trajectory. I can tell you that our government-to-government relationship is also very focused in a practical way on outcomes. So Foreign Minister Carr and I have directed our teams to take all the work we've been doing in our strategic dialogue and put together a work plan, because we got, as you say, diverted over the last months. All of that is what we are now working on together. But I don't think you would get any denial from either the ISI or the CIA that people in their respective organizations have contacts with members of groups that have different agendas than the government's. But that doesn't mean that they are being directed or being approved or otherwise given the seal of approval. So I think what we are saying is, let's use those contacts to try to bring these people to the table to see whether or not they are going to be cooperative. In fact, as I said earlier, and this kind of goes to your point, it was the Pakistani intelligence services that brought a Haqqani member to a meeting with an American team. So you have to know where to call them. You got to know where they are. So those are the kinds of things that we have to examine and understand how they can be beneficial for our mutual efforts to prevent the kind of attacks that threaten Pakistanis and Americans.
So CIA and ISI, they have contacts with different militant groups.
Yes.
But CIA have no evidence against ISI that ISI helped Taliban to attack U.S. embassy.
Well, it was actually the Haqqani Network that attacked the U.S. embassy.
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware.
You don't have any concrete evidence.
Look, when we talk about a big organization like the ISI, there are some people who could sit here and absolutely tell you truthfully they know nothing. And there are other people who, again, have contacts who may know something, but certainly had nothing to do with whatever happened.
Top level clearance wasn't there.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, we have no evidence of that.
Moniza.
Well, Secretary Clinton, now that America is negotiating with the Taliban, are there going to be any red lines? Because I know that you have said that you are going to fight, you are going to talk at the same time. At the moment, Mullah Omar has been very clear in his position. He has said that he will not abide by the Afghan constitution and he will not lay down his weapons. At the same time, we have seen reports that your government has approached him through Germany, through Tayyib Agha, one of his aides. So what really is your position? What is your policy on talking to the Taliban, and are there any red lines?
There are certainly red lines. And this is a potential negotiation, not a negotiation. There is a long way to go before we even can test whether it's real or not. Remember, Professor Rabbani thought he was meeting with someone who was sincere in pursuing peace on behalf of the Quetta Shura and was killed for his trust in that. So, we have no illusions about the difficulty of this, but we do have 3 red lines that are shared by the Afghans. Number 1, any group that wishes to enter into a peace or reconciliation has to agree to give up violence and abide by the rules and the constitution of the country, and they have to cut ties with Al-Qaeda. And for me personally, I will tell you that abiding by the Constitution and the laws of the country of Afghanistan means respecting the rights of minorities and women. I mean, I cannot in good faith participate in any process that I think would lead the women of Afghanistan back to the dark ages. I will not participate in that. Young girls deserve to go to school. Women in childbirth deserve to see a doctor.
Absolutely.
They need to be freed of a burqa if that is their choice. So I have not only the red lines of my government, but I enter into this with a sense of obligation, particularly to the women of Afghanistan who have made great progress. Everything from the number of girls and going to school, going to university, lowering maternal and infant mortality. I could not in good conscience see people come back into power who would say to the two of you, get back in your houses and never come out and don't let me see
And
your
to
face.
you, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
True.
I would just like to ask Secretary Clinton, you are known to be championing women's rights, but how are you going to make sure that the people that you're speaking to, including the aides of Mullah Omar and the people who are now in power, are actually going to respect basic rights and freedoms, especially of women? How are you going to make sure once your troops pull out?
Well, first of all, we are negotiating a strategic partnership document with the Afghans. We are committed to an enduring partnership with the people of Afghanistan, as is NATO. So, yes, our combat troops will be transitioning out. The Afghan security forces will be assuming responsibility, but we will still have a presence in Afghanistan for many years to come. But I think your question goes to the heart of any peace negotiations. Ultimately, you have to make a decision, and it's up to the Afghans to make this decision. We cannot want peace more than they do or less than they do. It is up to them. But if some of the overtures that we have knowledge of prove to be true, where the Taliban may not yet be publicly proclaiming, but they're rethinking some of their policies, particularly on girls and education, then we will explore that. But this is all very premature because we truly do not yet have a negotiation going.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to jump the gun and predict what will or won't happen. But I thank you for asking about red lines, because it's very, very important to us that we be sure that the gains that Afghans have made not be erased.
Secretary Clinton, during your last visit, you assured the Pakistani nation that the US wants a long-term relationship with Pakistan, but many of the critics said that it's just a marriage of convenience, and as long as the US has interest in the region, it would stay with Pakistan. And recent events have again given those critics a chance to say that Pakistan and US have become estranged lovers. And as you were talking about this 90 to 95% of agreement taking place on the specifics, can you tell us what are the 10 to 5% challenges which are remaining in this relationship?
Well, I think that that is part of the resumption of our strategic dialogue, which we have now begun again to work through that. For example, to go back to the question about fighting and talking, I think that some of our Pakistani counterparts are concerned that that's not an effective way to proceed, that maybe what first needs to be done is try to negotiate a ceasefire. That's just an example of the discussions that are going to be held. And that is something that we want to discuss, we want to hear the views of, but it's done in the context of overall agreement about where we're trying to head. So I think that the important takeaway from the last 24 hours is that we had very frank, very open exchanges, which I think you do with friends and allies, and I think we heard each other, which sometimes in the din of all of the excitement and the press coverage and the accusations coming in different directions, we can't hear. But that doesn't mean the path forward is easy, because what's at stake is so important, and therefore we're going to take it day by day, step by step. But I'm feeling very reassured that I think we're back on the right track.
One follow-up on this, Secretary Clinton, from the times of President Bush right up to the election campaign of President Obama, and you yourselves pointing out the hinterlands, the border areas of Pakistan being used to launch attacks, and the same accusations being repeated again and again. And we see so many high-profile visits taking place and similar statements that things are improving, things would get better, and like that. Why Americans love Pakistan so much?
What?
Why Americans love Pakistan so much?
Why do we love you so much? Well, you're very interesting people, for one thing. And this is an important country with enormous potential. I mean, I'm big on potential. I like to go around talking about, people living up to their God-given potential, countries living up to it as well. And we've had a commitment that I think is, challenged from time to time because of our respective histories and the way we see things. But it has continued through many decades. And I was reminded last evening by the much younger foreign minister on the Pakistani side that in the previous generation of Pakistani American leadership, there was so much cooperation. I mean, the Tarbala Dam, universities built, lots of things that left a lasting impression that we believe helped to contribute to what was a new state that came into being the same year I was born. So I have a special affinity. I think it's something that is also fueled by the many Pakistani Americans who make so many contributions to our own country. I have many Pakistani American friends. They go home, as they view it, to Pakistan every year, but they're very hardworking, very loyal Americans at the same time. So it's that kind of combination which makes us somewhat unique in our relationship.
Yeah, and we've been great friends, opening up with China, breaking down the Berlin Wall, and so on and so forth. We haven't done any
Secretary
less.
Clinton, is there an agreement between Pakistan and the US on Afghan blueprint? And secondly, is President Obama's coming to Pakistan early next year?
Well, with respect to the Afghan blueprint, that's part of what we are working on at the two upcoming conferences where all three of us will be present. The Istanbul conference, which is an effort to try to get the region to buy into a vision of the new Silk Road, something that we think can help organize a lot of economic activity through the region. And we know that without Pakistan's active support, it's not going to work for Afghanistan. And I have to commend your government. And I told President Zardari and Prime Minister Gilani and others that the work you're now doing with India to open up your borders to trade and commerce is exactly what we believe is going to benefit Pakistan over the next decade. So we're looking at a blueprint of which Afghanistan is certainly an important part, but just a part. How do we enhance the economic integration in South and Central Asia, which will be enormously beneficial to Pakistan? You are so perfectly geographically sited to take advantage of all the increase in trade that we think could come. The pipeline that we think is a great idea from Turkmenistan to Afghanistan to Pakistan to India that would bring natural gas. Now, it's a geographic and security challenge to build such a pipeline, but are we serious about it? Are we willing to explore it? That's the kind of discussion we're going to have, and the blueprint for Afghanistan fits into that. With respect to President Obama, I cannot say for certain, but I think he's going to be preoccupied traveling around the United States next year because it is an election year. But as you know, he has very fond memories from the trip he took to Pakistan as a young man, and I've heard him say personally he would like to return, but it might have to be a second-term visit instead of a first term.
If Naseem allows me,
sure.
You have been the political rival of President Obama. Will you be contesting elections against him again?
No, sir. No, no. First of all,
it can't be a yes.
He will be and deserves to be reelected. And I cannot participate in politics in my current position, but I have said on many different occasions that I think President Obama will be reelected, which I think is good for America.
Secretary Clinton, just to pick up on something what Mazhar raised about gas pipeline projects. We were told, it was reported that during the last energy talks between Pakistan and United States, United States officials advised Pakistan to stay away from the Iran-Pakistan pipeline project. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, of course, we believe that Iran is a very difficult and even dangerous neighbor for all the countries that it borders. And there is an apparently quite unpredictable political and economic situation inside Iran right now. Therefore, we think if there are other routes and other ways of meeting Pakistan's energy needs, it would be a more likely and enduring commitment.
So, but Pakistan is our friend, Iran is our friend, you know that. Yes, Nadeem.
Yeah. Regarding Istanbul conference, is there any possibility of representatives of any Taliban groups participating in that conference?
No, because this is way too early in the process, and nobody's even sure who that would be. You know, so no.
And one question relating to that Lugar-Berman bill. We have talked so much about US assistance to Pakistan, but what I have heard from Ministry of Finance, only a few $100 million have been actually given to Pakistan out of those $1.5 billion promised economic assistance. What happened to that program?
Well, actually, $2 billion in assistance has been delivered in the last calendar year.
Under Kerry Lugar-Berman?
Yes, and also under flood relief. So about $900 million in response to the first devastating flood, and the rest in civilian assistance under Kerry Lugar-Berman.
If I can briefly ask, do we have any favorite groups in Afghanistan as far as United States is concerned, and similarly as far as Pakistan is concerned, when we talk about reconciliation with the Taliban?
Do we have any favorite groups?
Yeah.
No. We think that there have been some important contacts within Afghanistan of people representing elements of the Taliban, elements of other terrorist groups like the HIG, for example. So we know that there's a lot of outreach going on. That's one of the things Professor Rabbani was doing. I think it's part of the reason why we believe the Taliban killed him, because he was being too effective in outreach. You know, he came to Islamabad several times to consult here.
Good friend of ours.
And they weren't ready, and they also thought it would, demoralize the Afghans, which it did, because it was such a terrible national blow. So we're exploring all of that.
If there are no favorites,
Too
then
many
I think
follow-ups.
just very briefly, if there are no favorites, then on the outcome, I think Pakistan and United States are very clear that strong and stable Afghanistan is in interest of the region and Pakistan as well. Then why there are so many strong differences on strategy and tactics?
Well, I just said I don't think there are, once we actually sit down and go through them. I think that there is agreement on everything from squeezing the Haqqani. Now, the tactics about doing that are obviously up to each government. There is absolute agreement on trying to move forward on a peace process. The particulars of it have to be worked out, but generally I think we're in agreement.
Okay.
Yeah. Anwar.
Secretary, today in your press talk along with our foreign minister, you said that you again emphasized the need to take action against militants and clearing safe havens in Pakistani controlled areas. I'm interested to know about the US action or policy regarding Fazlullah, Maulvi Fakir, who are operating from Kunar and Nuristan provinces in Afghanistan and staging attacks on our border areas from the province from which I belong in Dir, Swat and in Chitral. And in recent attacks, more than 100 people lost their lives. Should we expect concrete action by the US and ISF troops in Afghanistan against those safe havens in Afghanistan? And can you give me the timeline, because you expected us to operate against those elements in days, not in months and years?
Well, as I said at the press conference, I think we have to take action against safe havens on both sides of the border. And we are upping our military tempo against safe havens. I referenced a recent military operation that went after, in particular, the Haqqani Network operatives. But we agree with you that we have to do more on both sides. And it may be that focusing on the safe havens right now is the most effective way, number one, to diminish the attacks and thereby save people's lives. But number two, send an unequivocal message to terrorists on both sides that they've got to come to some kind of negotiation with both the Pakistani government and the Afghan government.
Pakistani, military spokesperson here, they have come in media and told us that we have always shared intelligence information regarding Fazlullah hiding in Afghanistan. So can you tell us what has been the response of US? Would you help us in getting hold of that terrorist? Because, when we do programs in SWAT, people still have memories of those bloody days in which women, men, old people were hanged and were killed.
Yeah, it was terrible. I remember what was happening in SWAT, because it was happening as I was becoming Secretary of State. And I thought the actions taken by your government and your military were absolutely essential in order to dislodge them from territory they were trying to occupy. And we take seriously all of them. Now, look, as you know, on both sides, intelligence is sometimes actionable and sometimes not. And sometimes even when you act on intelligence, you're not successful. And I won't go any further than that.
One last question.
No, I think too many last questions. I'll ask one question, and then Hamid one, and then it will come very short.
I would like to inform you about the today's headlines in Washington Post and New York Times. These are about your press conference in Kabul.
Hamid, keep it
Clinton
short.
warns Pakistan on insurgent heavens, and New York Times said Clinton issues blunt warning to Pakistan. So tomorrow there will be more headlines about your warnings in the US media. Would you like to tell us about your
What
warnings?
headline would you like to see? That's a
Would you
good.
like to tell
What
us
headline would you like to see?
the truth about your warnings?
Yes.
Well, I think I've discussed them. I've discussed them in a press conference. I've discussed them in an interview. I've discussed them in this press roundtable. And as I've said, I'm not saying anything different than I've said in the past or that I said in Pakistan.
So
And
these headlines are not correct.
Well, they are correct. I'm warning that if we do not handle these safe havens together, the consequences could be drastic for us both.
So same message of support and pressure?
Secretary
Yeah,
Clinton.
on both sides of the border.
Yeah, Secretary Clinton.
Both sides of the border.
Let me ask you one final question. This relationship, you know, we were very upbeat 2 years ago. Now we are in kind of really, it's a trouble phase. Do you ever reflect in Washington and ask yourselves what mistakes Washington also made to bring us where we are? Because, you know, we know there are mistakes that were
Well, one
by
thing
Pakistan.
that I believe, and I have also said this before, I think sometimes our public messaging is not helpful. And therefore, you know, we have to be more thoughtful and careful about what we say and when we say it. Now, I think that the press coverage on both sides, frankly, gets a little hysterical from time to time, which then ignites political reaction, which then leads to statements being made on both sides. And so, yes, I think that we bear certain responsibility for that, and I think it's important that there be a real conscious effort. There's too much at stake, and most fundamentally for the future of Pakistan.
One small question.
You know, one second, you know, they're telling me they're going to get us off air. She's desperate, and make it very brief.
I'll make it very
brief.
I'll
and
make
then
it
come to
very
you.
short.
Very brief.
Well, there's a perception here in Pakistan that America looks at Pakistan from the prism of Afghanistan. Now, 10 years ago, you came here to this region to fight the Taliban. Now you've ended up negotiating with the same Taliban. You are going to be leaving Afghanistan, and many people in Afghanistan and Pakistan both feel that you're going to leave Afghanistan with a structure which is there's going to be no political parties there, there's going to be no independent judiciary there, so there will be no structure to have a transition to democracy.
Okay,
have
too
you
long the
failed,
question.
Have you failed in rebuilding
Okay, have you
Afghanistan?
failed in Afghanistan? Okay, the question
No,
is as
I would
simple as
say
it.
not at all. I think, usefully remind us all that building democracy takes time. And there has been tremendous changes in Afghanistan, but there is much more work still to be done.
Okay.
And that's why I said we're going to have an enduring partnership to work with Afghanistan to make sure that they get the benefit of building institutions. This is a long-term commitment, but we do not look at Pakistan through the prism of Afghanistan. We look at Pakistan as a very important country with whom we have an important relationship that needs constantly to be replenished by negotiations and discussions and openness and everything that we try to do.
And how
Well,
important
I think
is-
on
Secretary
this
Clinton, just one
note,
you had a 45 minutes one-to-one meeting with President Zardari.
he wants some news. He's director news. He's director news. Give him some news.
You had 45 minutes one-to-one
Yeah, give him
meeting with President Zardari. Any specific decisions have been taken? And secondly, there were reports in Pakistani media about President Zardari had wrote a letter to President Obama. Can you confirm or otherwise?
That's an important question.
Yeah, now I cannot confirm because so I would leave that to others if it happened to confirm it, okay? Because I don't think that's appropriate for me to say. But I think that President Zardari fully appreciates the relationship between our two countries. And we talked a lot about trade and investment. We talked a lot about the need to keep pushing at market access, which is something that, you know, he is totally committed to. And I gave him an update that, you know, we're working on a bilateral investment treaty, which I hope we'll be able to negotiate to conclusion in the next months. We are working to expand this new Silk Road vision. We're working to get an enterprise fund passed by the Congress. So in response to President Zardari's very strong appeal for more economic activity and more market access, I gave him an update and told him that we would keep working.
Thank you very much, Secretary Clinton. I think on this note we'll end this session, and we really are grateful that we had this candid opportunity for this candid dialogue. Not only do our two countries have a long history of close cooperation, I think both countries at varying degrees have an important role to play both in the region and I think within the Asian continent as far as economic and security structures go. So, you know, this is a relationship that must be ongoing. Thank you very much. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
Nice.
And
Pleasure
thanks
to
to
have
all
you.
of you again.
Thank you.